Yesterday was the rookies' turn. Today, the Bucs veterans will report to training camp. The long national nightmare is over.
So what you're telling me is all the veterans' comp time is used up.
Well, yes, including mine, apparently, even though I don't feel like I've been away much. But, yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling you. So we're going to find out who is in shape, who wasn't in shape, who can practice, who can't. And not really a surprise, but, unofficially official. And that is that Chris Godwin, who we've all kind of wondered about how is he doing, because no one has actually seen him do much since he injured himself in Week 7 against the Ravens with that dislocated ankle. I wrote a story in the Tampa Bay Times on TampaBay.com. Check it out. That Godwin, in fact, will not be participating in any football activities to begin training camp. First practice is Wednesday morning, I believe, around 8:30. Godwin will be working just exclusively, with the trainers, maybe even indoors a little bit. I would presume, but it's not dissimilar from when he tore 3 knee ligaments back in 2021 and then started the 2022 season. Kind of with trainers, and then build himself up to some individual, little pat and go drills, and then build himself up a little bit more. And by the next week, he was doing a little bit of 7-on-7, and then eventually by the end of training camp, he had some 11-on-11 situations, and then he actually started the game against the Dallas Cowboys that year. But in talking to Jason Light, when we did the podcast a few weeks ago, when I talked to him back in June, he sort of predicted this. I mean, he sort of said, that look, they know that Chris is going to do everything he wants or that he possibly can to get ready for the season opener. He's going to want to play. And he told me, he said, we didn't take, Emeka Egbuka because we felt like we have to take a receiver because of Chris's injury. But he reminded me that he says, we signed Chris to a long-term deal. And that's still remarkable that Godwin would dislocate his ankle, fracture a bone in his foot, be basically immobile for I don't know how many weeks. And during that period, when we got to March, they brought him into the room and he signed a 3-year contract extension worth about $22 million a year and left supposedly $30 million a year on the table with the New England Patriots, although I don't know how much of that was guaranteed. The Bucs basically guaranteed 2 years of that contract. But he said, we signed Chris for the long term, and this, if anything, helps us a little bit, talking about Egbuka. Not that we would intentionally rush somebody back, but he says, but sometimes there's a dire need for them. The player might push himself a little too fast. So I think that they're, kind of going to sit on him, make sure that the trainers take care of every possible thing they need to do before he resumes his football activities. I don't know that he will be on the physically unable to perform list, during camp or not. Don't really necessarily expect that. They have 90 players, so it's not like you can't participate in practice, and they have plenty of receivers. But it's interesting that this is what we kind of anticipated. Now we know it's going to happen, and no timetable for when he'll be on the field. If I had to guess, and it's only a guess, just the way they're talking and the fact that they have Emeka Egbuka, assuming nothing happens to him, of course, or Mike Evans or some of the other receivers, Jalen McMillan, I think he's going to miss 2 games. And so when you think about it, you're going to be without Tristan Wirfs for at least 2 games, more likely 4. You don't have Chris Godwin. I think you're a little bit covered there. More concerned the Bucs should be with the left tackle position because, Tristan Wirfs hadn't allowed a sack all season last year and over 1,000 snaps. And so you got, Charlie Heck coming in here as a undrafted, or not undrafted, but as an unrestricted free agent was originally signed as just a swing tackle. Now he's going to have to start and sort of hold the fort for a while. So they got a lot of guys in different roles. But, with Emeka, like his best position is probably the slot. And he's the closest thing to Godwin without being Godwin in terms of character and also just his ability to play fast and play every position on the field and make those combat catches. So I think they're going to be fine. But it's really interesting when I go back and think about it. It's like both times Chris got hurt, they signed him to contracts. You know what I mean? Like, or franchised him or did something. That takes a hell of a lot of faith in a guy that has left parts of his body all over the National Football League. And he's not for nothing. He's 29. You're not talking about a 26-year-old Chris Godwin 3 years ago. He's 29 years old, and he has at least 2 years kind of guaranteed, right? So he'll be 31 before they get to an option year. And and again, you don't bet against them, but you do wonder at what point, if any, you get to diminishing returns with this guy.
You do wonder, but obviously the Bucs are comfortable with it.
I guess.
But the other part is when you sign the guy after an injury, like, the 3-year deal for Godwin means he doesn't have to rush back, even in his mind. It's not like it's a contract year and you're playing for next season. Like, you've got 3 years, but 2 of them are guaranteed, I believe.
Right.
So, you don't have to rush. If you miss the first 2 games or go on IR and miss the first 4, like, it's okay. It's not hurting you long term, financially in that part, and a healthier you later in the season is better than missing a couple games early in the season, particularly when you've got depth at the wide receiver position now. So, but still at 29, it does show a ton of faith from Jason Light and the Bucs that the work he's going to put in, although we've seen it before. So they can look back at last time he got hurt and the work he put in and the effort to get back and how good he was once he got 100% healthy. He was leading the NFL in catches when he got hurt the second time that season. So
yeah, 50 catches before he got hurt.
Right.
And that's the shame of it all. Like, because I wrote the story literally for that game against the Ravens about how he had come all the way back. Big
it was your
jinx by
fault.
me. Yeah, I mean, I feel that way. I felt responsible. I felt bad. I did. Also felt bad that it happened in the final minute of a game, and Roquan Smith, originally there wasn't a penalty on the play, but then they reviewed it and they actually fined Smith, whatever the fine was, $11,000, $16,000 for a hip drop tackle. And then it went under appeal. And Jordy Nelson, of all people, was the appeals judge, I guess, because Derek Brooks does that work too. And he overturned the penalty. They overturned the fine and said that no, it wasn't an illegal tackle. So, however it happened, it happened. It's been. I tend to think this injury in a different way, but in some ways was worse for Chris. I know it seemed to be a lot more painful, just in talking to him. He has battled to get to this point, and I'm sure, like I said, he'll do everything he can to play. But the good news is that they're very deep at receiver, not just because of Emeka. They've got other guys, obviously, that are trying to make this club. It's stacked at receiver, whether you're talking about Trey Palmer or Sterling Sharp or Rakim Jarrett. There's so many dudes. And the other guy that they're really excited about is Taz Johnson, the Tasmanian Devil. I'll tell you what, man, I like Tasmanian Devil. You know what I mean? This guy can return kicks. He's a Bucky Irving at wide receiver, if that makes sense. But he's only 152, 53 pounds.
Well, he's a Bucky Irving, but he's tiny.
Tiny.
I wonder how that's going to play in the NFL. I mean, for punts and special teams, fine.
Yeah.
But lining up, at receiver, I wonder how that's going to play. I mean, a lot of times receivers are bigger than the DBs. He's going to be a ton smaller.
I would imagine I can just imagine him on jet sweeps, on quick little hitch routes, on wide receiver screens, quick twitch plays where he can get the ball in space and then kind of make people try to miss. He's a big make you miss guy. But you're right. I mean, he's not going to go over the middle of the field and try to make the catches that Chris Godwin or Mike Evans makes. But there's a place for him, and primarily he'll have to win the job as a punt returner, and that was Trey Palmer's job last year, and he did a pretty good job, to be honest with you. So those guys aren't looking to just let him ride them out of the NFL. But from what I understand, he's got a little bit of juice. Now, he was a 7th-round pick for a reason, his size. He can run now. He's very fast, unlike Bucky is not a blazer, but still makes people miss. But they were teammates at Oregon. They're excited about playing with each other. And all I know is that what this will do is give more reps to those guys that are, fighting for that 5th, 6th receiver spot if they go that deep based on special teams. And like I said, that's going to determine it. Are you going to be able to be a gunner and go down and cover kicks? Well, that's not going to be Taz Johnson, but he can win the kick return job. He can win the punt return job. And that's what he's going to have to do. So, no Godwin, no problem for now. we'll keep our eyes on it every day at practice. It'll be one of those deals like, first thing you look, where's Godwin? Is he running? Is he doing any individual drills? What's he doing? That'll be a daily thing. And then the other story that I wrote about in the Tampa Bay Times and on TampaBay.com, this one's kind of interesting. Going back, what was it, a week or so ago when I wrote that Tristan Wirfs somewhat unexpectedly had knee surgery, at a very late part of the off season, obviously just a week or so before camp, and that he was going to miss all of the preseason, all of training camp, and at least 2 regular season games, and looks like he will likely go on PUP and miss either 3 or 4 games, depending on when they put him on that list. And it's very significant. It's the most significant injury they have on this team to start training camp with, because this is a guy that's only missed 1 game in his career. But, the question was like, okay, something's wrong here, right? Like something's screwy, because Tristan Wirfs got hurt in the middle of the season. He only missed a week. He finished out the year. He participated in the offseason, and then come mandatory minicamp or thereabouts, we saw him out there in a pretty significant right knee brace, right leg brace. And we asked Todd Bowles about it, like, yo, what up with the leg brace? He goes, oh, it's just precautionary. He should be fine for training camp. Well, not so fast, my friend, as Lee Corso would say, because he's not fine. And so, and I talked to agents and different people. They're like, there's a story there. There's something there. Like somebody, misdiagnosed it, or why wasn't the surgery done sooner if it was necessary, that kind of thing. Turns out it was neither. And I had heard this and I confirmed it. He had basically, he was asymptomatic. He literally didn't know what he didn't know, throughout the off season. Since he injured it, back during the year, and he finished the regular season playing, he wasn't in the kind of pain or an inordinate amount of pain where he thought, I got to get this thing checked out, And at the end of every season, every player goes through sort of a physical, sort of a checklist. Like you have to go through an exit interview so that they're aware of what you're, it's kind of like, it's not as bad as hockey. Like we find out that, hockey players are out there playing with broken legs and stuff like that when the season ends. But they check them out, and they set a plan for rehab and this sort of thing. And there was no need or apparent need for surgery on Tristan Wirfs, who had just played, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 games in a row after his injury. And so then he got to June. We saw him with the brace on. And then when they went in there, they said, well, let's go in there and do something arthroscopic here, see what's going on. And they found something. They found something that he had not felt. And that's what the asymptomatic part of it is. So really, at the end of the day, it's nobody's fault. It's something that happens. You're 330 something pounds or 40 pounds, whatever it is these days. And there's a lot of pressure on your legs and a lot of pressure on your knees, but these are tough guys and they don't complain. The mentality of offensive linemen is you go out there, you work, you play every day, and that sort of epitomizes who Wirfs is. So whether he communicated properly or something like that, I don't know, but basically they're falling on the side of, just didn't really know he had anything wrong with him.
Well, and that's the thing is these NFL players, they're in pain all the time.
They are.
So the fact that he had some pain in the offseason, but it wasn't very bad, is not uncommon.
No.
Especially at that size.
Mm-hmm.
And so right. I guess you can understand that. And these guys don't like to admit when there's something wrong either.
No, they don't. They don't.
It'll get better on its own. And so you don't necessarily, you're not always 100% honest with the trainers or the team
or yourself.
Yeah. It'll get better. I mean, guys do that all the time. They're not even NFL players.
Sure.
Oh, it'll get better itself.
Sure.
That's what guys do.
Yeah. When I was talking to Ali Marpet, the story I did a few weeks ago about him, he's studying to get his doctorate in clinical psychology. One of the things he told me, was he became addicted to pain. Does that sound weird to you?
I've heard others say that before.
Yeah. He said, I quit playing. He goes, but there was nothing to replace that ache, that soreness, right, that I had kind of grown to live with, that was kind of like my friend. And he goes, I had to find a way to replicate that, whether it was a 60-mile bike ride or something he normally didn't do, which was run. He goes, but I just needed to feel that soreness, you know? And so basically, these guys go through life kind of aching everywhere. You know what I mean? Like something is bothering them after they start the season for sure. And frankly, once you played a couple years in the NFL, you got something all the time, right? You might have some things some of the time, but when you play long enough, you've got something all the time. So in the offensive line, just the nature of these guys, they don't like to be singled out. They run in a pack. They're the closest group on the team. Everybody wants to be out there. And you don't give up, even if you're an all pro. The mentality is you don't let somebody else do your job. You don't let somebody else take the rep, right? So it must have gotten to the point, at least by mandatory mini camp, where they said, yeah, just, probably just a little twinge. Why don't you just sit this out? And then when they dove into it deeper, obviously, and it didn't get better, it wasn't until they did surgery that they found some things that they didn't know were there. So the end result will be he should be better for it when and if, whenever he comes back. But, it's not, it's one of the biggest questions going into training camp is, and you won't know until they hit the field in Atlanta, and Atlanta has invested a couple of high draft picks and some edge rushers because they've had the fewest sacks in the NFL last year and for a couple of years now. But you won't know until we get to week one and probably beyond. Week two in Houston, they have two really good outside pass rushers, whether Charlie Heck can hold up. Luke Gedeke, who's done much, much better, almost played at a Pro Bowl level. But his strength is not pass protection as much as it is, road grading, as most right tackles are. So there's going to be some bad plays. You don't have a Tristan Wirfs, and those guys don't grow on trees, and you cannot replace them with another guy that doesn't give up any sacks. So big challenge for Josh Grizzard in his first year as offensive coordinator. Whatever his plans were, a lot of them are out the window. A lot of them are out the window because he has to account for the fact that he doesn't have a Tristan Wirfs, which means you got to put some resources over there to protect your quarterback. Because the one thing you can't do is get Baker Mayfield hurt. So job one will be, protect Baker Mayfield at all costs, his blind side in particular. And then I'm anxious. I don't think he'll say anything, although he's done a ton of podcasts and things lately. I haven't heard him talk about it, but there's a psychological hurdle that Baker has to get out of his head. He has to trust that those guys will protect him. You know what I mean? There can't be any, one of the worst things that could happen with quarterbacks is they start seeing ghosts. They start anticipating pressure, and sometimes it's real and sometimes it's not. But if you get out of that pocket too soon, you're going to miss opportunities to make throws. And, we'll have to see how that goes. We won't know. But those two things right there, if I told you you're going to be without Godwin and Wirfs most seasons, you wouldn't feel good about it. And I don't think the Bucs do either. But those first four games, they're going to be really brutal. I mean, at Atlanta, and then you go at Houston on a Monday night football game. There's going to be a lot of hype. Pretty good football team, CJ Stroud, all of that. And the last time they were in Houston is when they, blew that lead in the final 40 seconds or go, and CJ Stroud was a rookie. And then, after that, you got the Jets at home in your home opener. Okay, you feel like you could probably hold up against the Jets. But who knows? I mean, you got Fields at quarterback now. He's going to run around and make some plays. They've typically had a decent defense for years. But even if you get by that one, now you got the Eagles at home. So, you don't want to be staring 1-3 in the face. They've been 3-1 the last 2 years. You don't want to flip that over and be 1-3. So it's going to be a challenge. And that's here's the thing, Steve, that's if no one gets hurt, right? Like once you start playing football, like once they go out there Wednesday, I've seen it happen. I remember Ryan Jensen go down. I see these seasons get torpedoed in training camp and in the preseason games before you ever get to the starting line. And I'm telling you, and I've said this before, if I was a head coach, nobody's playing in the games. Nobody. And probably very few guys are going to play any contact football in practice if I'm the coach. Because if I can't get to week one, I know you got to do the work. I know you got to see certain things and go against looks and that. But if I can't get to week one with as many of my players as possible, I have no chance in this league.
That's what's really changed. And as you're down to 3 preseason games, you're going to be down to 2 soon enough.
Yeah, you got 2 joint practices, which are good because you can control that to some degree.
Yep. I mean, the players, the lack of training camps now, and not that there's a lack, but the limited of time you can practice in the off season as well.
Oh, it's a country club.
For most of the players, it's fine.
Right.
They come in shape. I mean, training camps used to be because players were working other jobs and completely out of shape.
Yeah,
and,
no, you're right.
But I think offensive line play suffers.
It does.
Has suffered for years because that's such a cohesive unit.
Tackling is bad early in the season.
And tackling.
Always.
Those are the two things that have suffered.
Yeah.
Everything else I think is fine with.
Yeah, the pitch and catch stuff is okay.
Yeah, the less practicing, the less contact, all that stuff. But tackling and offensive line play in the NFL has suffered over time.
Yeah.
Because they just don't practice tackling enough, and the offensive line doesn't get enough reps together.
Right. And you'll have ball security issues because you'll have young guys who haven't faced the physicality of the NFL, and they'll fumble.
Yeah, although I think the defensive players are so good at stripping the ball now.
Oh, they are.
They are. I think it's just how well the defensive coaches and throughout college and NFL have taught that skill.
Yeah.
Some of it's young guys, but a lot of it's just the defensive players are really good at it.
Yeah. Some of it's just with the younger players, they're not ready for the violence. I mean, in college football, it's very good, and there's a lot of college players that make it to the NFL, but not every guy across from you in college football is an NFL player. When you get to the NFL, the worst guy on the roster is an NFL player. So when they get out there and they start getting knocked around by guys that are, 6'4", 256 pounds and run faster than they do because they're running 4.3 something, it's not a fun experience, and they got bad intentions. So you'll have some sloppy special teams play. There'll be missed tackles, guys that aren't used to playing gunner. It might be a wide receiver. It could be a DB. Going up against double teams all the way down the field, guys lose their lanes. And so if you're going to make a play on special teams, it usually happens early. But on the balance, like, could it be worse? Yeah. Baker Mayfield's back. All your entire offensive line now minus Wirfs is back. You just can't simply sustain any more injuries.
Right. Although, could it be worse? Yes. I mean, Wirfs and Godwin could be out for the season. At
that's
this point,
the key.
We think they're out maybe 2 to 4 weeks, depending on Godwin. Godwin could be a little more. We'll see. But, they're coming back.
Yes.
At this point.
You got to weather the storm. You got to find a way to stay around 500. Frankly, you can stay around 500 in this division probably until December or later. But, in both years, regardless of how they start, we know that both years this team went from 3-1, then lost 5 in a row, 6 in a row, or 6 out of 7, 5 out of 6. And then they rallied. You just can't always count on digging yourself a hole like that. But a 3-1 start doesn't guarantee you anything either. So if you start, I remember every season it seemed like, and you can look it up, Tony Dungy's teams after that first year when they started 1-8. After that, I think every year for about 3 or 4 years they started 3-4. Every season, it didn't matter who they played, they were going to be 3-4. They had the one year where they were, I think, 5-0 in '97, and they really arrived. But beyond that, they were always off to slow starts. And with Gruden's teams, he started fast a bunch of times. John's teams, if they started fast, he rode the momentum. But if once they started sliding, man, he had trouble turning himself around, much less the team. And it was like turning the Queen Mary at times. But Bowles has found a way to do it. Bowles has found a way to be that steady voice and keep working and not be different, not change, get a little bit better. It's a little bit of a shame, and they're gonna have to accept this as a team. They're going to have to realize that, hey, we may be better in October than we are in September, but they can't make excuses because this team really has its goal as going to a Super Bowl, in winning the Super Bowl. And I think it's realistic. I think, with an offense, again, assuming Josh Grizzard can catch up and be a quick study, but you have some cohesion there with the same system. I mean, they got a real chance. The NFC, once you get past Philadelphia, okay, Detroit, I don't think San Francisco, even though there'll always be talk about them, but they're in a transition. John Lynch said it. He goes, we got to get younger. They're kind of where the Bucs were after Brady, where the difference is they have a young quarterback that just got paid. Now he's making about $50 million a year in Brock Purdy, but Brock Purdy needs a lot of things to go right. And they've got some players that are long in the tooth and some other guys that, they've had to get rid of, and some are injured. So I don't know how good the 49ers are going to be. We're going to find out, but I think the Rams will be good. So, the division is the thing, and they managed to win that 4 years in a row. And, Atlanta would probably be the best other team in this division, but they lost to Atlanta twice last year and still won the division, right? So, people hate New Orleans. I've seen them ranked as low as 32 in terms of talent on their roster, So it's possible just to kind of, the season's so long, you just got to weather it. You got to hang in there in September and try to get to October with your guys. But so far, this is, other than Wirfs, nothing's unexpected here, and we'll see him out there on Wednesday to see who actually reports. And to that end, their final draft pick did sign, as we mentioned, Benjamin Morrison, and so they got everybody in camp. Hey, before we talk about the Rays, and I might write their obituary tonight, I want you guys to get on down to Breitling Boutique in International Plaza Mall. By the way, I saw my wife was reading me this thing where Jalen Hurts has I think it was a customized Breitling watch that he wears. I won't give you the dollar amount because none of us could probably afford it. But that just goes to show you, when you're looking for a great timepiece, and even if you're an NFL Super Bowl winning quarterback, you're going to go to Breitling Company. You're going to go to Breitling Boutique. Breitling Company has been making the best Swiss watches now for over 140 years. They've been in International Plaza for more than 5 years. Now, you're going to go to the center of the mall and go upstairs, second floor. That's where you're going to find Breitling Boutique. Great customer service. They're used to dealing with all kinds of professional athletes. You will see a Buccaneer in there once in a while, maybe a Rays player or Lightning if you hang out long enough. But make sure you spend some time in the store. They'll pour you a drink, tell you about all the great timepieces that they have for men, the chronomats, the Navitimers, and watches for your wife or your girlfriend. These are sports watches. They're beautiful, they're durable, and they have an array of different colored wristbands for her to choose from. And they've been doing the promotion for celebrating the NFL's 104th year anniversary. 32 different team watches while supplies last. That's every team in the NFL. If you're a particular fan of one, including the Buccaneers, you can ask to see the Buccaneers team watch. You can go on TampaBay.com and look at a picture of it, most likely. It is gorgeous. It has the team color on the face of the watch, beautiful chronomat watch with the logo as well. It's Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. And when you get there, make sure you tell them you heard about it right here on Sports Day Tampa Bay. All right, I don't know what the final was in that Rays epic loss to the White Sox. I'm assuming it's over or close to it. But they were down 8-2.
As we record, it's 8-3 in the bottom of the 8th.
Ooh, chipping away. Okay, well, we'll see if they mount a great comeback. But failing that, they still have a couple games to go with a very bad White Sox team, last place White Sox team. You know what's weird about the Rays is like their record against teams that are under 500 is abysmal.
It is, and they have
Makes
one of
no
the best
sense.
records against teams above 500.
Yeah, makes no sense. They rise and fall to the standard of their opponent, and that's not the sign of a great team. You don't want to ride that roller coaster. But for whatever reason, they struggle against some of these teams they're supposed to beat, including the White Sox. And the news is not good, by the way, all across the board on the injury front. It's just not working, right? We still don't see Josh Lowe. Or not Josh Lowe.
Brandon Lau.
Brandon Lau.
Well, plantar
those,
fasciitis.
those two guys. Yeah, Brandon is either Lowe or Lau. Brandon Lau with the plantar fasciitis. And then Hassan Kim had to lead the game.
Lower back tightness.
Yeah, he dove back into first base, nearly got picked off, and came up aching. And so here we go with Kim again. And then Shane McClanahan, I guess, was scheduled to throw a bully, and he threw about 10 pitches and didn't feel great. And so
they said it was okay.
It was okay, but
okay.
The way they said it, well, it's just okay. Remember the last time he went out, his velocity was like around 92 miles an hour.
Yeah, it was about 4 to 5 miles an hour less than normal.
Yeah. So if a guy throws a bullpen, correct me if I'm wrong, you typically throw more than 10 pitches, wouldn't you?
Well, if you're only throwing 10, you better say, I feel great.
Yeah, it's like, I'm good. No, I never felt
10
better.
And go, he was okay.
But you can't even get loose. Can you really get loose in 10 pitches? I mean, I guess if you're throwing 100 feet to warm up maybe or something, or stretch playing long toss, but like off the mound, 10 pitches seems like almost like a shutdown, right? Like, okay, that's enough. I don't know. I just got bad juju around Shane McClanahan. This thing, every time he was supposed to go, like you said, to rehab. Let's see if he makes it to Durham and does a rehab start. If he does that, you feel a little bit better. But just reading the body language and sort of what they said didn't sound hopeful to me. Sounds bad. And if it continues to go bad with him, you really do worry about his future at that point, because the Tommy Johns and the elbow thing, and then this year being a possible wipeout again. I mean, you wonder how much a guy can really go through. I know he'll do anything to play and to pitch, and he'll continue to do it, but it just doesn't seem like the arrow is going up with that. So they got a bunch of guys out, and key guys at that. And when I heard this is what made me want to just about write their obituary. Well, a couple things. One, and you alluded to this a little while ago. It's like, well, they did their job. They got us to football season. They held our interest. Okay, you guys can go do whatever you do now. We don't care. Because it's a sad commentary, but I think around America it's probably true. Because we're just crazy about football.
That's why golf moved the PGA Championship from August to May to get it out of football season.
Exactly.
And, lots of leagues and stuff. NASCAR moves stuff around, and
that's right.
Everyone tries to avoid the NFL because it is the 800-pound gorilla.
It's a monster. So they've done their job. But the more I think about it, like after this series, I believe, and this is unfathomable to me, they have 19 of their next 22 games on the road. 19 of 22. Oh, and by the way, the 3 games, little respite that they have at home, it's against the Los Angeles Dodgers. I mean, could you have a more talented team coming to give you a break? It's a
talented team, but they've been struggling of late. So,
they have been. They have been.
We'll see in another week if they're still struggling. But
they'll be. Yeah, trust me, they'll be on fire by that time. But still, it's not like. Of course, like we just said, to their point, they do better against teams with winning records than they do these teams that are under 500 for whatever weird reason. So maybe they'll step their game up. But I'm willing to say this because I don't care how good you are. Like that number, that 19 of 20, like these are human beings, right? That got a kid on airplanes, sleep in hotels, be away from their families. I know they're in 6-star hotels. I know they have great accommodations. I know they take care of these guys in training rooms and give them what they need. But man, that's a long time. That's a long grind to be away from home and your home stadium, but just your life too, right? Like that affects players. That affects people. And to have to go through that and expect to stay in the race, to stay, right now you're on the outside looking in, so you have to gain some ground on some teams if you're going to make the wild card. I don't know, man. With the injuries they have now and the likelihood there'll be more, not less. As the season goes on, you don't get healthier. You just don't. You don't get healthier, and guys don't get more productive necessarily. They may have hit their hot streak, about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, but you got to play the games, right? But I don't think they're going to get there. Let's see
what they do at the trade deadline.
Okay, let's talk about that. What can they do?
Well, do they
add starting pitching? Add bullpen help?
Bullpen for sure.
Okay. But the bullpen didn't give up 8 runs today in this game. Shane Boz did.
No, I mean, but the bullpen has
struggled
of late.
It has been the problem. Yeah.
Now you've got Boyle and Seymour up here.
Right. Seems like an upgrade.
And you added Baker.
But if you don't get Brandon Lau back, right?
Right.
If Hassan Kim, I mean, they played without him when they were hot, and Taylor Walls was doing the job at short. But you really need. I mean, you're paying this guy.
But you had Brandon Lau at second. You didn't have.
You had Lau at second, right? So you can't start losing bats like that, and then, I don't know.
But the Rays are also a team, and this season I don't know how Eric Neander looks at it. I think they're a good
one
team.
Eye closed.
They're a good team, but they also like to. They've been known to trade and try to make themselves better on the fly, and maybe it doesn't make you better this year, but in the years to come it does. For instance, could you trade Zach Littell and get a bat? Somebody who needs a starter. Littell's making the most on your team.
To help you this year or in the future or
It
both?
could be a bat that's under control for a couple years.
Yeah.
Could they trade Caballero? There's reports today.
There's a lot of teams that could
are
use
very
him.
interested in him. Yeah, very
he's
interested.
one of the lead
right
in stolen bases, can play any position.
Yeah, you're about ready to get Palacios and DeLuca back. DeLuca's been on a rehab. Palacios getting ready to start his rehab.
Right.
So I assume Christopher Morel's not going to be here very long.
God, I hope not.
Well, I don't know if they could trade him. Maybe they can, but
can't be much value for him.
You're not going to get a big piece for him. You may get some minor league.
You might just DFA him.
Could you trade Pete Fairbanks, who's got a pricey option year for next year? I think it's $9 million-ish, somewhere in that range. Could you trade him to get a bat?
What does your bullpen look like if you do? Who's your closer?
Well, but then if you move a Caballero to get a bullpen guy, or they could. And do you feel Baker could be your closer, or do you try Ian Seymour in that role, who's been great in his first 3 appearances?
Yeah.
The Rays are always, like I said, I don't know what they'll do. And I think a lot of what happens in this series against the White Sox and then in the next, this road trip to Cincinnati, New York is going to determine, are they sellers, are they buyers, or are they going to, are they tinkering?
Teams, right?
Are they tinkering?
Yeah.
Do you trade a Taj Bradley's been talked about? And can you get a bigger bat for that?
I think by the time these first 2 series on the road are up, you're going to know whether this team's in it or not.
Well, I mean, assuming they lose tonight and it's in the 9th inning now to the White Sox.
Yeah.
You don't win these next 2 against Chicago. That's tough. Because Chicago's a bad team.
You need to win the series, and you still can. Look, it's the first game. I get it, but you can't lose a series to the White Sox at home. You can't really lose any series at home now with the road games you have coming up. And they've turned it around at home. Their start was abysmal, and they've turned it around. But
the other part is, and you said 19-22 on the road. So the first 7 are Cincinnati, New York. Cincinnati's playing really well of late.
First place teams, aren't they?
Cincinnati's not. They're just outside the wild card.
Okay,
actually. But they started off horribly this year. They've been playing really well and put themselves into playoff position now.
Okay.
The Yankees, of course, are ahead of you in the standings.
Yankees,
they're not first place because the Blue Jays are, but
yeah,
and they're a flawed team, but they're a good team still.
Sure.
And then you have the Dodgers at home, and then you go to the West Coast for 2 weeks.
Right. So you have a time zone difference, you have geographical distance, and then you got to play some good teams out there.
Being on the West Coast for a week or week and a half, about 2 weeks is rough.
Brutal. It's brutal.
But that's after the trade, though. So we'll see what happens.
I do. I think by the time this next road trip is up, we'll know whether these guys have a chance or not. I really think it's going to be that.
You'll know if they have a chance, and Eric Neander will have a decision of whether he's buying, selling, or not doing much.
Ripping it up,
Yeah. Because we'll know July 31st, 9 days from now, is the trade deadline.
Look, baseball, it's a funny game. That's baseball, right? It can turn, and you always have your streaks, and you have your good hot streaks and bad streaks, and most of the time teams are around 500, but they need one of those months like they had, a month ago, where they can rip off, 15 out of their next 22 wins or something, 22 games. But failing that, I just feel like there's too many teams to climb over in the AL East. There's too many teams to climb over to get to the final wild card spot.
Well, I think they're the first team out of the final wild card.
They are right now, but if you tank on this road trip, if you have a bad road trip, you're going to be out of it because you're close to falling out of it now. You're on the outside looking in. You're close enough to make the playoffs, but you're also still on the outside looking in. You can't afford to lose ground.
Well, the problem is after they lose tonight, they're 3 games above 500.
Yeah, right. You're coming back to earth, coming back to the 500 mark.
Right, and that's and granted, you're the only team above 500 out of the playoffs in the American League. Yeah. Texas is at 500 right behind you, but
right. But 81 wins is not going to get you anything.
No.
So you need to finish well above that. Well, we'll see. I mean, I have recency bias, but I haven't seen. Now, look, the other night, when they came back on Saturday night against Baltimore, I was like, okay, this team has some grit. This team has some fire. Look at Sampson. Look at the clutch hits here. And then you get the White Sox coming in. They lost the last game of that series against the Orioles, and then the White Sox come in here, and before I can barely turn on the TV, they're down like 6-0. Not a good start by Shane Baz. He had no command of any of his pitches, none. Just couldn't get the ball over the plate, and when he did, he got hurt. Gave up an early home run. That's kind of been the way it goes when they lose; they fall behind early. So we'll see. Just not a lot of good vibe going over there. But hey, we got football to look forward to, right? So we got lots to talk about in the NFL.
Yeah, you'll be on the field tomorrow for the first practice.
I'll be on the field Wednesday. That's correct. Yeah, tomorrow. I'll be melting out there. Although the forecast is for rain, which doesn't bother me but if it rains, it needs to rain and lightning so bad that they're in the indoor facility, which they hate to use, by the way. And it's difficult with 90 players in training camp to use anyway. But you don't want to, like we're going to go outside, but we got to wait for the lightning to pass. And then you're standing around all day. But Wednesday and Thursday kind of dicey weather-wise. But yeah, they practice so early that you tend to avoid those storms. And the great thing is your day is over. It starts early at 8:30, but your day is over typically by about 12:30, and then you get to write and do your dailies and things like that. But don't worry about me, man. I've done this before. I will power through. At least I'm not playing. I don't have that concern or that physicality. I just got to survive it. So a lot of sunscreen. Maybe a 70 SPF. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, but we'll get through it. It is what it is. And before long, we'll have actual football. We'll have preseason football, and then there will be, the start of the regular season. I think is September 8th. Got a trip to Pittsburgh where they're going to have joint practices with the Steelers before they play that preseason game. So that'll be something to look forward to. Get to see Aaron Rodgers, your boy, taking over in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting how that goes.
It is going to be interesting.
I don't know what to expect. It has a chance to be wildly successful or a big flop.
It could be. It definitely. I think it's not going to be somewhere in the middle. I think it is going to be feast or famine. I don't know. The Steelers are victim of just they spend way too much money on the defensive side of the ball, as evidenced by the J.J. Watt contract, and at the expense of their offense. It's great. I get it. You're the iron steel curtain and all this kind of tradition, but at some point, man, not only do you need a quarterback, but you actually need good players on the offensive line and wide receiver.
Well, this is the best quarterback they've had in years.
Well, it is. If he
actually had a decent season last year in New York, then that was a bad team
statistically. But yeah, if he wasn't 40-something years old with a 1 year removed from an Achilles injury, which hasn't helped him, but look, he can still spin it, and given the right circle. The one thing I'll say is I don't think you're going to have chaos in Pittsburgh because of the organization and because of your head coach. Rodgers, I'm not sure what he thought of Robert Saleh, and I know he didn't like a lot of the guys that came in after him, but he has had respect for Mike Tomlin. Those guys, Tomlin lost a Super Bowl to him, but those guys go back and forth in the past on the field and have had a relationship before he got there. And, unlike the Jets where Rodgers is going to be the biggest personality and take over that club, that ain't going to happen in Pittsburgh. Rodgers is not going to overtake Mike Tomlin as the voice of that team. And I think he probably is glad that's the case. He's probably all too happy to just, kind of meld into the background and be the quarterback and do his job and go home and let Iron Mike talk about things. But look, they both got to win. Rodgers needs a win. Tomlin needs a win. And this was the best available options when you looked at the free agent market. If they didn't want Kirk Cousins, if you weren't going to trade for him, I don't know what you're going to do. So we'll see. We'll see what goes on. But yeah, I'll be out there. We're talking about that. Go see our friends at Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. Check out the NFL watches, 32-team watches while supplies last. Watches for your wife, your girlfriend. It's Breitling Boutique. Make sure you let them know that you heard about it right here on Sports Day Tampa Bay. For Steve Versnick, I'm Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times. Have a great day, everybody.